Hello and welcome back to The Budget Gourmet. If you're new here, my name is Dan. I try to help you and your family create delicious recipes all while saving a little bit of cash. As you saw from the title, today we're making steak. Yes, it is real, and no, this is not a Dollar Tree steak, although I might have to try that one day. This is something that a lot of people would consider a luxury item, which it definitely is, depending on the kind of cut that you get. Whether it's filet mignon or New York strip, people associate steak obviously with steak houses, and we're going out for a fancy dinner tonight. As I mentioned before, this is all about the cut of steak, and that's actually why this steak is so affordable, because this isn't one of the typical cuts of steak that you might find. Actually, what we're going to be eating is part of a chuck roast. Beef, it's whatfordinner.com. That's what a chuck roast is. This large primal comes from the shoulder area and yields cuts known for their rich, beefy flavor. Features roasts ideal for slow cooking, as well as more tender, grill-ready cuts such as the flat iron steak. Everybody knows what a chuck roast is, but I actually found this guy on TikTok named, I believe it's called Butcher Dad or the Beef, something like that. I'll try to find it and put it somewhere here. But he actually introduced me to what is considered the poor man's ribeye, which was what we're going to do today. The chuck roast in itself, at times if you can find it on sale, is already pretty affordable. And this is actually just a section of the chuck roast. I can sort of buy a chuck roast steak outright. They already have it cut and ready to go. But if you want to do it yourself, I'll try to find a picture of what to look for, and I'll try to link his video somewhere here, and he shows you what to look out for in regards to finding the perfect chuck roast in order to be able to separate it into steaks. You can sort of see the natural separation going on. So I believe the chuck roast steak is actually this section right here if you were to separate it, and this is another steak, which you could also use, and I think people typically call it the Denver steak or use it for short ribs or something like that. But this is the part right here. You can see that natural separation. We're going to be focusing on this part right here today. Anytime I'm craving steak, this is my go-to way to have steak. Other steak cuts are boring to me, but maybe that's just because I'm cheap and I like knowing that I got a good deal and saved money. Before we get into today's video, I have an interview with a resident steak expert explaining why it is important that we as a people eat steak. He's really gonna open your eyes. He really makes some profound statements that really changed my life. My brain was definitely expanded after, and just brought this new revelation to me about eating steak, why it's good for you, the benefits of it, and I think you guys are really gonna enjoy it, so let's just get right into that. Hello, I'm here with resident steak expert. Tell him your name.
Mikey Farkle.
Now Mikey, can you tell me how many steaks you've had in the past, I don't know, month or so?
If you're looking in the past month, I've had approximately 30 steaks.
30 steaks, so that's like a steak a day, probably.
Absolutely.
Something like that.
Yes.
What's your favorite cut?
I would have to say a ribeye.
A ribeye?
Absolutely.
Do you think it's important that we eat steak? What do you say to all the vegetarians out there?
I say to all the vegetarians that God provided us with this beautiful animal called a cow. And He provided us with this precious meat for us to eat. It's healthy with lots of vitamins, and it's good for us, so we have to eat them.
Do you think that you could make a steak for $3?
Absolutely, you can.
And we're gonna do that today.
Budget Gourmet right here, baby.
Okay, so starting off, here are our steaks. As you can see, the price is $7.62. So basically $3. It's probably like $3.20 something. I just said it was $3. Don't worry about it. Before we cook our steaks, I'm gonna let them sit out to come up to room temperature for probably about 30 minutes or so. And what better way to pass the time than to create our sauce that is going to pair very nicely with our steak. I am going to be making a chimichurri sauce. A chimichurri is essentially just an herbaceous sauce. You can use parsley, cilantro, and I'm using shallots and garlic, and you just pair that along with some olive oil and a red wine vinegar. There's not a lot of prep when it comes to this sauce. If you notice, I'm just going to be finely chopping up some shallots here, much in the same way I would do an onion, and I'm doing the same thing with my garlic, just a rough chop, trying to get them all into little bite-sized pieces. And then the only other chopping that we have to do is our parsley and our cilantro. I'm just going to be bundling this up and doing a rough chop here as well. In my opinion, I think one of the best sauces for steak is a chimichurri. All of those vibrant herbs are just going to cut that richness of that fatty steak. Now that all of your ingredients are prepped and ready to go, you're just going to finish off your sauce with some extra virgin olive oil and some red wine vinegar or a vinegar of your choosing. This is all to taste, so you can add more olive oil or more vinegar should you choose, and I also salt and pepper to taste as well. You could also add some crushed red pepper or some fresh chilies, that's optional, but after you give everything a good mix and the flavors are all good, this is what you should be left with. Now that our sauce is complete and our steaks have come up to room temp, it's time to start cooking the steaks. As you can see, this is called the poor man's ribeye for a reason. Look at all of those nice sections of fat in there. That's going to add a lot of flavor. And these steaks were actually pretty thick, so that is a good amount of meat for the price point that you're paying. I'm not doing anything too fancy here with the seasonings, just a generous amount of salt and pepper, especially because we have our chimichurri on the side, which has shallots and garlic in it, which is going to add a lot of flavor as well. Really making sure I season these steaks well and pat them down, because a lot of that seasoning is going to get lost as soon as it touches the pan. Once our steaks are ready to go, I'm going to get my pan on a high heat. You're going to want your pan to essentially start smoking and build up as much heat as it can. I'm going to be using a neutral high heat oil here, and I'm going to lay our steaks down away from me so oil doesn't splatter. And we're just going to leave them alone so they can start to build that nice sear and produce a nice crust. I usually set a timer, and about every minute and a half or 2 minutes, I like to flip my steaks, and you can see that a beautiful crust is already starting to form. I try not to flip it too much because I really want to see that beautiful golden crust start to form and to see that fat rendering down. After both sides of my steak have been seared off, I like to lower the heat, and I'm going to add a little bit of butter into the pan. I'm going to use this butter and start to baste my steaks. This is going to help to cook the steak and also just add so much flavor and to keep it moist. And you're really going to see that even at a low heat, that butter combining with all of the steak juices, it's going to produce an even better sear. You can see it's starting to become really golden brown, and it just looks absolutely delicious. Now, there are a lot of methods to determine when a steak is done. For me, I just like to time it. I've cooked a lot of steaks, and a steak half this size, I usually like to cook for about 7.5 minutes. Since these were about double the thickness, I actually cooked them for maybe 12 minutes or so. If you're struggling to find out which method works best for you, please look it up from a professional. After my steaks are done, I like to just wrap them up in tin foil and allow them to rest so the meat can reabsorb some of those juices for probably about 7 to 8 minutes or so. And that is essentially it. Your steak should be cooked. I like mine around medium rare, medium. I just like to cut my steak into thin slices like so, and we're just going to pair it along with our chimichurri. This was very affordable, and I hope you enjoyed the recipe. Thank you guys so much for watching. It was very simple, easy to do, and you have that little bit of luxury at a not so luxurious price point. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next week.